I'm Edward Frank, and we're doing a podcast today with Joe Taylor. I'd first like to thank our sponsors for NAFCO. NAFCO is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, and it's an acronym for the Northern Appalachian Film Collective. Our sponsors are Dakota, Du Bois Area Council on the Arts, and West PA Systems. West PA Systems is your electrical design contractor for your 21st century needs. Joe Taylor is a longtime radio guy and an author. He's participated in a number of acting projects, and we're going to talk to him about his career in radio mostly today. And say hello, Joe.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me.
I've known you for a while, not really well. We met at the Writer's Block Party events, which is a local writing group here in Brookville. And you actually appeared as a bit part in a documentary I did on the Douglas Stallman Scripture Rocks. And I believe I saw you in a play at the Rice Theater at one time, perhaps.
Yeah, I did. I was with them for about a dozen years. Yeah, did about 10 plays.
A couple weeks ago, you posted a notice that you were basically retiring from the radio business. How long have you been in the radio business?
I've been in for, it was 60 years last September or October. Yeah.
How did you happen to get into the radio business to begin with? What drew you to that?
Well, I was an only child, and one of the benefits of being an only child is you get to have the run of the house and use your imagination. And this would be back in the late 40s. We did not have television yet, and radio was still doing a lot of network programming. So radio was the prime medium in our house, and I listened to it and listened to the announcers, and just kind of decided, probably as early as 7 or 8 years old, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a radio announcer, and then I would, get a little toy plastic microphone and pretend I was on the radio. And eventually, I was allowed to go into our, in my teen years, go into my local radio stations in Rochester, New York. Some of the announcers would let me sit in with them, observe what they were doing, give me commercial copy or newswire copy, and I'd go home and I'd practice. And I had a wonderful teacher in high school, Stephen Miller, and he allowed me to, he talked to the school principal or administration about having me be able to borrow a tape recorder on weekends, and I could go home and I could work on my announcing. And then I got my first job when I was 16 years old as what's called a board op, as a person playing the records and behind the scenes. And then a few months after that, they heard my voice, and it's an interesting story how they heard my voice. I don't know how I did this, but it was election time, 1960, and I sold the program director. This was a beginner's radio station in Rochester, New York. We started for $1 an hour. When minimum wage went to $1.12 and a half an hour, that's what we made. So I somehow convinced my program director, and I'd always been a student of politics, that I could give them statistics about different wards and different voting trends in Rochester, New York. And they allowed me to actually sit in at the table on election night and talk about this ward or this district being a bellwether ward or district. And I'm on the air doing this. I'm 16 years old. The owner liked my voice, and within a month or so, I was doing the afternoon trick on the radio station.
You've got a very good radio voice. Did you sound substantially different when you were much younger?
Maybe not, because I was in a school play, a grammar school play. I might have been in the first or second grade. It was one of these things where everybody was a month of the year. And I was September, and I remember I got, August did their little bit, I'm August, whatever, and then I am September, I bring on the rain. And the crowd erupted because I had here's this little, Pillsbury Doughboy kind of kid with this booming voice. So I guess, yeah, I always had this voice, but it was in a midget's body for a number of years, yeah.
I see. So you worked your way up to having an afternoon radio program.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was the most interesting thing you ever did while you were in radio?
Well, I mean, because I've worked in every aspect of it on the air for a lot of years in program management and being a general manager, but I think the most interesting thing, the most, I guess, memorable thing would have been not too long after I got into the business, being on the air in Fall River, Massachusetts on September 22nd, 1963. Playing music. I remember I was playing, it was an LP, it was a red label, Columbia label, Doris Day's album, Hooray for Hollywood. It was about 12:30 or some, early afternoon. And I was doing the afternoon show there. And I looked over to the other studio to my right and I saw the news director. And it looked like he was bouncing up and down and he was looking at the wire machine, because the wire machine was just clanging, bang, bang, bing, 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 bing. And that meant a bulletin, but what it was doing was beyond a bulletin. And what it was, of course, was the news of John F. Kennedy's assassination. So we immediately went to playing classical music, joined the network, whatever, did cancellations. But the thing I remember most is ending my shift at 6 o'clock that night. And Fall River is a pretty populated area, and usually when you left the building, and we were out a little bit in the suburbs, and you would hear traffic sounds and whatever, the sounds of life, and opening the door, going outside, and there was no sound. Fall River was a very heavily Catholic area, and JFK was their president, and I'll never forget that, being on the air when that happened, yeah.
Well, you were on the air through a lot of events in the last 70 years, probably. Did you broadcast anything related to like the moon landing?
No, because we had network coverage for that. Probably the most newsworthy things, well, actually, an event that I did cover that left a mark was I was working at the time for WJAS in Pittsburgh, which at the time was an NBC. They called them O&O. It was owned and operated by NBC. And when I got my paycheck, it had the NBC peacock on it. And I was a newsman. I did news and talk there. And this would have been 1968. And we got word of a mine disaster in Mannington, West Virginia, which would have been about maybe 2 hours south. And because we were the closest NBC-owned station, another fella and I were put in a single-engine plane. I'd never flown before. I didn't tell them that. I'm afraid to fly, but I wasn't. But we got sent down there. And I, for about 24 hours, 36 hours straight, fed the NBC network on this mine disaster, which took the lives of 78 people. And I'll never forget it because there were no accommodations for us, so I was allowed to sleep at the home of a mining family, a very nice family. And they told me all about the trap that mining was, that this was the only way these guys could make a living, but they faced death every day. And then I remember the callousness at the way Consolidated Coal Company treated the disaster. And what they had to do, they announced they were going to, at a certain point of time, block the mine off. And I never forget it. I mean, it just left an impression of that area of the length that people have to go to make a living. And it was an interesting experience. I covered some riots in New Haven, Connecticut, and in Pittsburgh. I covered a first-degree murder trial, which impressed me because it was so antiseptic. It isn't like you see on TV. It was like pretty much this is what the verdict's going to be, and that left a mark. So most of the things that I've covered, as a newsman especially, did leave a mark on me.
Do you think that the mining industry has changed since that disaster, or do you think the underground mining is pretty much the same?
I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not a newsman now. I don't cover anything like that. But based on some of the responses I've seen from some mine owners in recent years, I don't think so. I think they're willing to send people down there to die. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really comment on that in an educated fashion.
About the time you were getting into the radio, television became more and more popular. So now it basically dominates what's going on, and the radio is second or third or fourth place in the media sources. Would you like to comment about how radio has changed from when you first got into it to its current state?
Well, first of all, I will take issue with that because when television hit, it didn't really, it took radio time to recover a bit, but what radio did, it went from broadcasting pretty much network programming for a good chunk of the day, and it became local. It became very, very local, which allowed it to identify with its community, started branching off, getting into various formats, attracting certain demographics, and really held its own in a whole different way than television, along with television, for years and years and decades. It has been in the social media era that radio has really begun to sputter, because there are people who have grown up never listening to radio. They're 20, 25-year-olds never listening to what we call commercial radio. But radio has shown a resiliency throughout the years, and what radio stations are doing now, as newspapers are doing, they are not just radio stations, they're not just newspapers. They are multi-platform media operations. The radio stations that I've been associated with as primarily a consultant and doing some on-air work over the past 10, 15 years, all have their own websites, they all stream, and they sell ads that are on radio, they're on social media. So their radio station, again, is evolving. It is not the centerpiece to a community as it used to be. And it has cut back its local news coverage and local presence. But it is still, commercially, it's still viable. But it's fighting. It's fighting for ad dollars. It used to be just radio, newspaper, TV, and now, it's fighting with everybody in the world, from placemats to social media, for ad dollars.
I saw a link recently on Facebook that listed the locations of 10,000 radio stations around the world that stream live. You can just click on a button.
Oh yeah,
and listen to news from Iceland or from Singapore or wherever.
One of the things I resent about that is, as a kid, I used to do what they called, which is DXing, which is listening to the radio and getting in faraway stations and then writing into them, and they would send you a card, and then getting a shortwave set. And that's all gone now because you can just, I watch BBC News on cable, and you can do the same thing with on your computer, radio or TV.
The last 20 years, there seems to have been, in my observations, a rise of talk shows targeted to a specific audience, more so than I noticed when I was growing up. Maybe I just didn't pay attention. But you've got shows like Rush Limbaugh's show, which received a massive popularity, massive following, which is syndicated nationally. And he was a very divisive person. So do you think that the changes in the radio structure and its relationship to the communities changing has allowed this rise of sort of niche.
Well, what you're saying
programming.
dates back to Reagan era deregulation. Before that, a company could only own 7 AM, 7 FM, 7 TV stations. There are no limits now, and especially in both radio ownership, you have a company like iHeart, which owns hundreds and hundreds of radio stations. That eliminates jobs. It eliminates everybody is hearing the same music. If they're doing talk, they're hearing the same talk. So that has happened. The other thing that has happened is the end of the fairness doctrine, where you couldn't just get on the air and spout craziness, and that again was repealed, and there's no limit now. Basically to what someone can say on the air and get away with it. I mean, my God, when I was coming up in the business, the FCC would be, if you did some of the craziness now, they would be on you. You would be risking your license, and it's just gone. Free speech is one thing, but it's become irresponsible speech. And I will say it's not. People like to say, well, it's also on the left. I'm sorry, it isn't also on the left. Not to the degree it is on the right.
There's people who say, oh, we should bring the fairness doctrine back and all this and that, limit the number of stations that a network could own.
Well, see, what happens when you allow stations in markets like ours. Thankfully, in Clarion, we have an independent broadcaster. One of the stations in Du Bois that I've been associated with is an independent business owner. But I can guarantee when they will sell to corporations, because corporations will just, be making money off of it, adding another station to their business. They can shut the thing down and just run it from one central location. And in doing that, you're not only losing jobs. The most important thing is you are losing a link with that community. You're losing that, and that is critical. And also, if they're doing talk from national talk, they're getting one voice. And granted, it may be from the left, but most likely it's from the right.
I see with the Sinclair News Network, which owns like tons of
small and medium market,
television stations, they have like a certain line that their newscasters must say these things as part of their news programming, and it's not really news so much as it is propaganda.
Yeah, and they've had some legitimate news people walk out on them. Yeah. I can say this, having done news in New Haven. When I say done news, I don't mean just reading the news. I mean reporting it, and really being a news person. New Haven, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, and working for large companies at the time. I never had any kind of corporate influence. Anyone telling me what slant to take on a story. That's a fallacy. That's a fallacy. The companies that I worked for were owned by very wealthy individuals or very wealthy corporations who would, of course, be right-leaning, and it never came down to anyone at the editorial level, at my news director, telling me, take this slant on the story. When I was a newsman, which was again back in the 60s and 70s, that never occurred. Yeah.
How do you think the changes in technology from when you have started to today has affected the how news and radio is being promoted or executed?
Well, from an executional point of view, I can tell you this. When I got back for about 7 years, up until a few months ago, doing a conversation show on a local Du Bois station, it's all, it's computer, and I don't have the greatest computer skills, and it took me a while to get acclimated. It's all, I was used to reels of tape, and I did a lot of features for them too, and it was all on computer. So yeah, you could not have walked off the air, we'll say in 1991, and come back on the air in 2021, and you'd be totally lost, because it's like every other business, it's all computerized. Yeah.
A portion of this podcast was recorded as part of a live stream interview and session with the Watershed Journal at the Watershed Bookstore in Brookville. I want to thank them for allowing me to incorporate portions of their live stream about Joe Taylor, the author, into this podcast. Thank you very much.
Hi, welcome. My name is Sarah Rossi. I'm the creative and managing director for the Watershed Journal. We're sitting here at Watershed Books with a new author series with Joe Taylor. And just a little bit about Joe. He's the author of I'm Just Lucky to Own My Own Car, which came out recently. And he has been in radio all of his life, so part of the joy today is going to be hearing him read his words in his own wonderful performing voice. He's won a number of awards for series and documentaries that he's done. So he's a practiced storyteller. He's the father of two daughters who also took on the writing, Jean, Alexis, and Jackie. And he's been in Writer's Block Party, the social group, for almost 3 years, and he's appeared in every single edition of the Watershed Journal. So we love hearing him. We love getting to hear his stories. Here is Joe. No further ado.
I was hoping there'd be more ado, but maybe we can do some of that later on. Thanks, Sarah. People have asked me to describe what the book is, and it basically is observational. There are 60 pieces, and it loosely follows the arc of my life, with a lot of observations, personal observations about people I have known, situations I've been in, and sometimes just observations that are just coming out of my brain and are off somewhere. I call them delusions. I will jot down just on I have a yellow pad with me. I'll jot down on the yellow pad the essence of an idea. Like I wrote a couple of weeks ago, I did a thing on missing Friday nights and going to a bar, and I had written that concept down, and then I looked at it. No, I think I'll develop this. So yeah, I don't do it that way, John. We all do it different ways. Sometimes, like I say, and I think everybody does this, is that everything comes to you intact, and you just open up and it comes out. I mean, then you go back and edit it a million times, but it's there. Yeah.
Now I understand you have another book coming. Do you have any idea on when?
Yeah, I'll be. In fact, Patty Zion is sitting here in the room, and Patty edited it for me. It will be. I hate to say a major book, but I mean, as far as lengthwise, it's 62,000 words. I'm going to bring it out in the fall. It's roughly about my 60-year career in radio, but it's not all about, and then I went from here to there and did this and did that. It's, again, observational. I mean, it's about different people I've worked with, people that worked for me, different radio stations that I worked at. Being on the air, for example, when JFK was shot. And then I also try to, and make it as interesting as possible, explain the radio industry, which is really experiencing a very slow, painful death. And I get into, how the FCC works, why you hear people like Rush Limbaugh, or not anymore, obviously, on the air, and the way radio stations used to be so critical to a community, and there are 25-year-old kids who probably have never listened to a commercial radio station. So it's comprehensive. It's looking at the business from the inside out, and I think it's a pretty interesting book, and I'm going to try to go for a pretty wide distribution, because I still think there is some interest in the business. And then after that, a year after that, I just finished it. It's a book on growing up Italian American in the 50s. So yeah, So my goal really is to live for 2 more years so these books can be out. And,
I hear that.
How long have you been writing? Did you start writing when you were young, or after you were more involved in your radio career?
No, I started. I remember as in grammar school, I wrote a lot. I would basically write like skits and things. If I was in social studies or whatever, I'd write a skit about something, and I always wrote. When I got into radio, I really, and especially when I got into management, I really walked away, as I think a lot of us do, from the creative side of ourselves. And I did not really start writing in earnest until about maybe 10 or 15 years ago, as I started to retire. And then obviously 3 years ago when I got involved with the group. It's just been nonstop since then. Yeah.
I have a question from John Posa. Joe, you're talking about your book about growing up in Italian America in the 50s. He's wondering how it will be different and unique from other books on a similar topic.
Well, because it's not like a sociological type of thing. It's again personal experience. It's families, different families. It's not looking at percentages of this and that and whatever. It's not analytical. It's a lot like the stuff that I write. It's all based on, the way one ant makes meatballs versus another ant makes meatballs, and it becomes a feud that lasts for 20 years. It's that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's also the thrust of it is that what the public sees of Italian Americans, is maybe comical, like the push cart guy or the guy with the organ grinder with the monkey with a goofy Italian accent, or Tony Soprano. Mm-hmm. And real Italians are in between. And it also does discuss some discrimination that took place against Italian Americans. And there's some instances within my family that I observed that. So it's again, I guess whether I want to or not, what I write is very personal. And again, based on observation.
You have been involved to some degree with the local theater, the Rice Theater in Du Bois, and perhaps some other things. Could you talk about some of your acting experiences? What kind of plays have you done?
Well, I did 2 of the Neil Simon trilogies. I was the father in both of them, obviously. What was it? Broadway Bound and Brighton Beach Memoirs. I was Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. I was the wizard in The Wizard of Oz and the professor. And it was there that I learned, your audience will like this. We'll wrap this up with this, okay? A little levity at the end, okay? I learned a comedic skill there. I had a line when I was the professor, when Dorothy is on her way someplace and she meets the professor, to do an aside. And in rehearsal, I did the aside. No, I guess it was the first night I did the aside. I turned to the audience and did this, okay? And the line is a funny line and it got a laugh, okay? So, second night, I turn to the audience and I do this. There's no laugh. I learned, and the director told me after the fact, oh, this is funny. This is not funny. So I learned a comedic skill the hard way. Of course, she didn't tell me that until the end of the run of the play, because I'm thinking because you condition yourself to wait for a laugh. There's going to be a laugh there. Nothing. Then she tells me, 2 weeks later, because we did it on successive weekends, what happened? You should have done it this way. She was afraid to tell me. So.
What would have happened was she afraid was going to happen if she told you that you're going to have like a meltdown. And
Well, it's like now I'm gonna walk off the set. Yeah. So. Thanks, Ed.
all right, thank you very much, Joe.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
You did a PSA for me for the National Speleological Society. I wanted to thank you for doing the PSA
Oh,
for me last year. You did the voice for it, and
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
appreciated it
yeah, thanks.
because you had a wonderful voice.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Thanks. You
Stay
too.
out of trouble.
Okay, thank you.